Non-Monogamy Help is a podcast where your questions about open, non-monogamous or polyamorous relationships are answered. Our host, Lola Phoenix, will consult a licensed therapist with over a decade of experience to address your problems. Names and locations have been changed or censored to keep your questions anonymous. You're listening to Non-Monogamy Help, the podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 14 of Non-Monogamy Help. I'm Lola Phoenix. Non-Monogamy Help is a relationships advice podcast for people in non-monogamous, polyamorous, and open relationships that comes out every other week. You can send your letters to nonmonogamyhelp@gmail.com and they'll either be in the podcast or the column. You can indicate if you really want to, and they will be posted anonymously. If you haven't heard already, you can read the columns, because it's also a column if you didn't already know, at medium.com/non-monogamy-help. If you want to get them in your inbox because you don't go on Medium or you don't pay attention and you want it in your inbox so it's easier, you can subscribe at tinyletter.com/non-monogamy-help, no hyphens. And if you want to be an amazing, super awesome person and get the columns and the podcast way before everyone else and support everything that we do, everything I do, actually, there's no we. I say we, it's the royal we. You can become a patron by going to patreon.com/Lola Phoenix. Even $1 a month is super amazing. I appreciate it all. And if you just want to get general updates or be constantly bothered about whatever podcast or column is out, you can go to twitter.com/non-monogamy-help, no hyphens, and I'll generally bother you there as well. So, awesome. Let's get to this week's letter. Exciting. I was basically Googling all night long with anxiety and insomnia with my son and partner in bed soundly sleeping next to me. My partner basically told me, not for the first time, that he desires to have sexual relations with other women. Actually, he said that he wants to get to know other people and he sees sex as a way to do this. He basically wants to explore. Here's some background on our story. We met on an online dating site about 4 years ago. He approached me. I had set an age interest range. I had set age interest in a range he was not in. So he did not come up on my feed of potential candidates, but I came up on his. I was looking for someone between 35 to 45. He was 26 at the time, and I was 39. I had set my age range this way because my previous relationship was with a younger man, and it didn't really end well, so I was not looking to repeat this experience. However, when he contacted me, he was intelligent and piqued my curiosity. We agreed to meet a week or so later, and on the first date, I honestly wasn't really interested in pursuing the relationship, but in the end, it convinced me otherwise, because we did continue to see each other. We ended up having a great sexual connection and continued to see each other over the course of 6 months until I got pregnant. I always wanted to have a child, but it was never the right moment or the right person. I had never gotten pregnant before and honestly wasn't sure I was fertile. We had spoken about this over the course of the 6 months together, and perhaps you could even go so far as to say that we unconsciously tempted fate on purpose. Early on, he expressed his desire to explore his sexuality coming from a conservative, religious, and sexually repressive background, and it triggered me then, but I kept telling myself that where we were living was momentary and would not last because of age difference. However, I got pregnant and this ended up changing everything. Except, as was confirmed last night, his desire to explore sexuality is very much alive in him. He has mentioned it to me a few times over the past 4 years, but usually when we are having a disagreement or difficulty communicating. He is a man of few words, and generally does not appear comfortable talking about his feelings, either because he is not in contact with them, and he has trouble identifying them, or because it is too difficult, but I suspect it is more the first point. I must say that he is a great father, and his son loves him very much. He is also a great provider for us as a family. As a partner, it is not easy to communicate with him, though, and I believe that this is our main challenge, although it is getting better. He is also a major introvert, and I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I'm a highly social person with high sensitivity and desire to connect and communicate. As I'm sure you have already deduced, I am not comfortable with his need to explore. However, I'm trying to be as respectful and as honest at the same time as digesting the difficult feelings it is bringing up in me. Another important detail to mention is that when I announced I was pregnant initially, neither of us really knew what we were going to do as a couple or if we would even remain one, but we both knew that we wanted to be a parent to our baby. He had already planned to leave the city and had a set date. I did not want to stand in his way. I think we both agreed that we needed time to figure things out as well, so technically we were still together. However, I suspected that he would be perhaps meeting other women while away, but never asked. He came back as planned 2 months later, and we were happy to find each other. He moved into my place, and we focused on the arrival of our baby. It was only several months later, after giving birth, that we spoke about what happened while he was away for those 2 months, and I discovered that he had in fact been involved in 3 separate one-night stands. He told me that they didn't fulfill him, and he was happy to find me again. The news didn't surprise me, but it saddened me, especially thinking back to the fact I was carrying his baby at the time, even if I rationalized that he was young, lacked experiences, and that we really didn't know what we wanted when he left in the first place. However, last night's honesty session has visibly rattled me. I am not a sufferer of insomnia, and the fact that I wasn't able to sleep at all just reveals how much I am shaken. It has really brought up all kinds of feelings. Some I can identify, some I am still struggling to identify. Fear of our life being together being destroyed, fear of losing him, frustration that he needs this, anger, sadness, fear that if he chooses to stay, he will resent me, fear that if he leaves, the life we have built will no longer exist. He just woke up to go to work and saw me standing in the kitchen, and I just admitted that I hadn't slept all night because of this. With tears running down my cheeks, he hugged me hard and said he loved me, and I said I am afraid that we're going to destroy our life together. He promised me it wouldn't, but can he make this promise? I don't know. I also told him that I think we need to see a couples therapist for help. I sincerely hope he agrees. In the past, he has told me he doesn't agree with the idea of therapy, but I have a feeling he sees that we need help sorting through this complicated issue. And then the letter writer also added this bit. I also forgot to mention that after the birth of our baby, we had a sexual dry spell, which didn't alarm either of us, but that we actually still have a good and healthy sexual relationship. We're still attracted to each other. The only issue is making time with our toddler. We manage this by sending him to his grandparents on a fairly regular basis, which he loves, and it gives us a whole weekend to reconnect. He said something to me that I don't understand. In fact, the announcement he made to me last night about wanting sexual freedom to explore came after sharing a powerful sexual and loving connection this weekend. And what puzzles me even more is that having sex with me doesn't make him desire freedom less, but actually heightens his desire for more sexual freedom. I must admit, it confuses me. Yeah. So there's a few things here that I would address. I think, first of all, the thing that I want to clarify, and this isn't... it's an understandable kind of mistake or kind of confusion that I think people have around introversion. Being introverted literally just means that you, in order to recharge, you need to be away from people. It doesn't mean that you're shy. It doesn't mean that you don't talk. It doesn't mean that you dislike being around people. There are probably a lot of introverts who don't like being around people and who are shy and prefer quieter places, but in and of itself, being an introvert just literally means that you need to recharge away from people, whereas being an extrovert means that you recharge by being around people. So that's all that means. Being an introvert shouldn't have anything to do with his ability to communicate, which is the first huge stumbling block that you're going to have in all this, regardless of what happens or the feelings going on. He needs to be able to communicate. And I feel like it's hard to tell from your letter whether or not he is genuinely interested in communicating and finds it difficult, or if he is just out and out refusing to communicate. Because those are different. Like, I can understand, even I myself, the thing I struggle with a lot is actually, like, telling people when I'm upset. I have a really hard time with healthy confrontation. I have a really hard time feeling that telling someone that I'm upset about something is going to elicit a supportive and happy response. So I have a really hard time with that. But I try. I do, and I want to try, and I show a willingness to change that. I don't know. I don't see you saying he out and out refuses, but it's, his comments about therapy are also really concerning, because I do think that you need to find a non-monogamy friendly couples therapist who can kind of walk you through this. But you cannot, there's so much effort you're putting into this. Like, you're psychoanalyzing him as why is he having such a hard time communicating? I think, da-da-da-da-da. And it's not to say that's a bad thing about you, but it's like you're putting all this effort in to understand him. And what's going on inside his mind? Is he putting that same effort into understanding you? And I mean, maybe he is, and he's just not communicating that, but we can't read minds, so he's gonna have to learn how to communicate, especially if he wants to do non-monogamy. It's not to say that monogamous people don't need to communicate, because they do. It's important in any kind of relationship, but I think that when you're tackling a lot of tricky feelings, it's unless there are also situations in monogamy that I think, can be tricky, such as having a child. Any major life change is a huge thing, and you need to be able to communicate. So I think that's like the first thing that kind of has to be tackled and has to be dealt with. Like, definitely pursue the therapist option, because I do think you need to like have some space to talk to each other. And I've been in situations in relationships where I've been with people who were people of few words, and who didn't communicate. And then when we went to therapy, they did open up a bit, and that was somewhat helpful. But another big thing that's really important is he needs to be willing to do therapy just as much as you. Like, it's so hard, and I see so many situations where like there are clear and obvious problems, not just with communication but with everything else. Like, he needs to be as willing to go to therapy and find a better way to communicate with you as he is about exploring his sexuality. Like, the enthusiasm on those two things needs to be equal. If they're not equal, then you're gonna get frustrated. I would get frustrated. Like, if I've been in situations, like I said, where somebody was great communicating in couples therapy, but didn't have enough enthusiasm to continue the therapy, and I was going to be the one who pushed them into therapy constantly. And it's really, really sucky. Like, you cannot fix everything. And you also, like, any situation where you are shoving someone into therapy, is just not going to help, because therapy only works if somebody really wants, is willing to work at it. Like any job, it works better when people want to do it. I mean, I guess I shouldn't compare it to a job, but it's not going to work if you're dragging him along, basically. So he needs to step up, and you need to like pay attention to that and not excuse his behavior. Like, you're excusing his behavior a tiny bit, like, oh, he's young and and yeah, like, there are certain situations in our lives, like, growing up in a repressive family, not getting a lot of experience, and then, being younger than you, that are going to make you have different feelings about things, and that's fine. But him being younger should not stop or curb his enthusiasm for fixing the problems in your relationship. And if he doesn't have any enthusiasm to fix those problems and has more enthusiasm to just do whatever sexual thing he wants to do, that's where you're going to run into an issue. The second thing that I really want you to think about is, and this is kind of like, so much polyamory advice out there will tell you, like, all these fears you're talking about. I'm afraid of our life being destroyed. I'm afraid of losing him. I'm frustrated. I'm afraid that if he stays and he doesn't do this, he'll resent me. And I'm afraid that, so much polyamory advice, like, responds to that by saying, get assurance from your partner. And I do think assurance helps in some instances, but I also think embracing your worst fears helps. Think about, face those fears. What would happen if you broke up? What would happen if you did lose him? I know it sucks and it's really sad to think about, but like, there might be a situation where that could happen. And I think that thinking about it, not, panicky and emotiony, is sort of like, oh, well, now I'm just going to put myself, because I do this to myself as well. I'm like, okay, well, now let me emotionally feel like what it would be like to lose my partner. Let me experience those emotions, because somehow that's going to harden me for when it really happens. Don't do that. But just think about the physical realities of that. I think it's always good in situations where you feel like your relationship status is precarious, especially if you have children to think about. It's just to have a thought exercise of, okay, if this did happen, what would I do? What would I do physically? What would my life look like? I mean, you say he is a good parent, and you both are interested in parenting your child, and you're both good parents. So I wouldn't necessarily think that everything's going to be catastrophic. And as long as you both show up and continue to show up as parents, in my experience, I'm not a parent, but I am a child of people who did show up and didn't show up. Many more didn't than did, but I can tell you what it's like to like have an adult say, oh, I'm going to be part of your life, and then fuck off. It sucks. So as long as you both are willing to show up, that part is kind of secure. But other stuff might change, and things change. Like, the only thing constant is change. So I've kind of found a good way to counteract my anxiety sometimes is to be really like thoughtful about, okay, what if this does happen? And what am I going to do? What are the plans? Because they might happen. You don't know. And it doesn't help to sort of go, oh, it won't happen, it won't happen, it won't happen. Even just having that thought exercise helps. I think two things are kind of sticking out in terms of, like, other than his willingness to communicate. If he is willing to communicate, if he is being enthusiastic about it, there are kind of two things that I think that you need to think about after that. first thing is time management. And like you already kind of mentioned this, like planning time around your child is really, really important. He needs to think about, and you need to think about, if you do go ahead with this and you do open up your relationship and he does have this freedom, what does that mean in a real time physical sense? Because I do think like some of your fears and your anxieties are coming from a really understandable place of like, because you don't know what this means. Like opening up your relationship, what does that look like? If you've never thought about it and you've never thought, okay, that means that every Friday, you know, he's allowed, the evening is his, he can do whatever he like, that's a free day. You know, if you've never really thought and planned around it, then literally, you know, your brain has nothing to go on. So of course it's freaking out, because you're basically saying everything's going to change, but I have no idea how it's going to change. You know, so of course you're scared. I mean, I would sort of liken this to someone, you know, you're going to adopt a pet at a pet store, but you have no idea what kind of pet it is. So how do you prepare? You would be understandably kind of rattled. And this is a little bit worse because it deals with some of your like deep-seated fears and, you know, all the things that society has told you about, like, you know, if someone loves you, they should love only you and all this kinds of stuff. So it's even more complicated. So I think that if you both sit down, maybe separately, maybe together, maybe with the therapist, or just have a think about, what does this actually mean in real terms? What does he want in real terms? Is it, you know, think about your sexual health boundaries, think about, because, you know, your child comes first and should always come first. Like, I always think that regardless of what style of relationship anyone's in a relationship or out of a relationship, if they have a child, that child is dependent on them, that child has to come first. So, and I'm not saying he doesn't think that, but I'm just saying, like, in the whole mishmash of this fear and anxiety and, oh, I want to go and pursue things, there's no hard discussion about what that actually means in real, actual life terms. Apologies for the background noise. So yeah, I think that you need to, like, that's a good way to start, and that kind of grounding will help calm some of your anxiety. I think also it's something interesting to explore with the therapist, and something to explore, and I think you should with a therapist, because I do think this is going to bring up some stuff that might be a little bit difficult for you. What about his, you know, he said that he had these one-night stands. So what about his previous experiences didn't quote unquote satisfy him? And why is he convinced that it'll be different now? And I think that's really interesting. Like what you said about, you know, being confused that having sex with you, or having good sexual experiences with you didn't automatically make him not want to do it with anybody else. It makes sense to me on a logical level. Like, I don't really operate that way because I'm kind of more on the asexual spectrum. But I understand that, because you sort of have been maybe romantically in that kind of situation where you're just sort of like, oh, I'm like really, really happy in this. I kind of want this really awesome connection with other people. I want to know what it's like with other people when it's this deep. And that's an understandable thing. I get that. But maybe that's why those other experiences didn't really like do it for him, because they were kind of, I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know anything about like the nature of these one night stands and what went on, but maybe what he wants is polyamory rather than kind of swinging or hooking up with people. He wants another deep relationship with somebody else, which is okay. But I think for you to, not only for you to decide if this is really for you, but I think if in order to like calm your anxiety, deciding what that really means physically. You know, what is your life going to look like? What is his ideal situation? And what is your ideal situation? I mean, you know, your ideal situation may be monogamy, and that's kind of like where you may have to, if you want to stay with him and in a romantic relationship with him, that's where you may have to think about compromising in some way if you want to. But if he presents you with this idea of like, okay, you know, I want to spend every other weekend with someone else, or, you know, like, what does it look like? Because there's so many different ways to do polyamory. There's hierarchical, non-hierarchical. I mean, I'm going to like input my own little opinion here, and that is, if you have a child, I think things should be hierarchical in that the child always comes first. But there are different ways that people do things. And I think it's really, really important to understand what that looks like for him, to make sure as well that you're not stuck with the vast majority of the child care is another big thing. That would not be fair, and that should not be fucking happening. A bit passionate about that. You're really gonna have to reiterate that, because it's not gonna be really cool if you're like stuck with the kid all the time. Like, even if you don't have another partner, you can have time to yourself. Maybe he can watch the kid and you can go out and you can have, you know, meet up with your friends. Like, not everything has to be replaced with a partner type of bond. If you're not really interested in other romantic relationships, do some stuff with your friends, spend some time with yourself, but make sure you get that equalness too. Like, don't, equalness, look at me Italian, don't sacrifice that, because that's going to create some serious resentment. I think it creates resentments in people's lives who aren't dating other people when they're stuck with the vast majority of the child care. There's certain times when you may not be able to prevent that if you're breastfeeding and all that kind of stuff, but make sure to get that in. And I think that you really need to think about, is this really what you want? And you may not be able to answer that question, but I think what's helpful to think about is, what are the benefits for you? Are you interested in another romantic relationship with a person? Are you interested in more sexual experiences? Are you interested in spending more time doing your own thing? Like, I really don't actually like dating. I really hate it. So when my domestic partners are out with other people, I do stuff on my own. Like, I do my own thing, and I like it. I like being on my own. It's not a bad thing. It's nice time for myself. Is that something you like? Like, can you go to a hobby group? Like, there's all kinds of stuff you can do with that free time. So think about that. Like, can you see this as an option for you? Is there something you can get out of this situation? Because what you don't want to end up with is agreeing to this because you're kind of in love with this person and you just go along with it because you don't want the relationship to end, but you're getting nothing out of it. He's going out and having all these new experiences. It's really difficult for you to deal with. And because it's difficult, because it's new and because it's different, and it deals with all those emotions of not feeling good enough and all this kinds of stuff, you don't really have anything to balance it with if you don't have a benefit to you. Like, I've experienced, tons of shit where I felt like, oh my God, I feel, my partner is interested in this other person. I feel inadequate, But then I kind of get to remind myself, like, okay, yes, but you chose this for this reason. And that's why. That's the benefit it brings to your life. I think if you have no benefit, you're really, really going to struggle, because you're just going to be like, why am I doing this? And why are you doing this if you don't see any benefit of it? And another thing too is, like, biggest kind of self-perpetuating or what is it? What is the word I'm thinking about? Sabotage. The biggest sabotage I think that people do to themselves when they're trying non-monogamy is thinking that anxiety and fear is a sign that they can't do it. You're going to experience anxiety and fear, especially like the first night. If you decide to go with this and you're like, I'm going to try it, the first night he spends with someone else is going to suck. And just expect that. Like, don't think, oh, I'm going to run a bubble bath and and it might not. I would just expect it to suck. Because I do think that sometimes people think, I'm experiencing so much fear and worry. Is it mean I'm not fit for it? Or I'm not up to the task because of polyamory, some kind of weird emotional obstacle course. And it's not. It's just that you're doing something new, which your brain, like, all your life you've been told, probably, I'm guessing, I could be wrong, that you've been told that the way that people show that they love someone is by only being with them. And that's the only way, and that's a sign of love. And being with other people is a sign that they're not interested in you. So you've got all of this stuff in your head that's telling you that this is bad. It's not just going to go away just because you decided to do something different. When you try something new, you're scared. You're going to be scared. Sometimes I think you have to go through. The only way out is through. And the only way to deal with it is to experience anxiety, come out of the other end, see that you survived. It's so much better. Like, when my domestic partner, like, he spends nights out, I'm fine. Like, I don't even, as long as I know, as long as it's not a, like, big shock or surprise, and that has more to do with, like, me being on the autistic spectrum than anything. But, I'm pretty fine. But the first, like, couple of nights, I was just like, it's impossible for me to sleep. I did the same thing you did. I wasn't Googling anything, but I was just sitting up all night going like, ugh. And that's where having that therapist will really, really help you, because that's a person you can talk through all this. But that's if you want to do this. But I'm just saying that as a preemptive thing, because I do think when people start off, especially if they read a lot of what is in the mainstream now with non-monogamy and polyamory advice, they're going to think, you're just a special star, and that's why that your partner is with you, because you no one else is like you, and they love you for you. And I think that's very nice. It's very, very nice. It's nice on a plaque with some flowers and maybe with some mood music and like, oh, in the background. It's not very applicable to people in real life who have other little voice in their head that goes, you suck, and you're the worst, and you're the evilest, horriblest person ever, and you're gonna die alone in a ditch. That counteracts all of that, like, nice stuff and makes it really, really hard. And that's kind of the thing that people don't really talk about, because I've mentioned this before in articles, there's a bit of a like crab bucket mentality, because every time a polyamorous relationship doesn't work out, all the society around them will be like, well, this is a polyamorous open relationship and those relationships don't work. So there's like all this pressure on, people in non-monogamous relationships to put up this good front and to sort of say, no, it does last and it is valid and it is da-da-da. Especially people who really want to fit that kind of assimilatory quote-unquote norm, the people who want to assimilate into the mainstream. They're going to want to put up this PR front. Like, no, yes, we have jealousy. We dealt with it. It's done. It's fine. We put it away. We packed it away. It's dealt with, and nobody has it anymore. We're all fine. All smiles. No one has any problems here. And I get why people do that. But on the other hand, I do think that people have struggles, and it's okay to talk about. I don't want you to dive headfirst, especially with the Googling, and read all this stuff and then try it out and experience these torrent of serious, like, scary emotions and then think that there's something wrong with you, because there really isn't. You're trying something new, you're going to be scared. So yeah, that's my advice to sum up. 1, introversion doesn't mean that you're not communicating. Like, it just means that you like to be alone to recharge. That you need to establish, I don't know from your letter, maybe you know, but you didn't mention it, whether he is refusing to communicate or he is struggling to communicate. And that can be measured by his enthusiasm. He needs to be as enthusiastic about going out and trying all new things sexually as he is about fixing and addressing the issues. It sounds like he's quite good. Like, he's hugged you, he seems supportive, but I want to stress that there needs to be some equal enthusiasm there. He needs to, like, be super enthused about that. Think about, not panic about, it's easier said than done, I know. Think about some of those, your contingency plans, your plan Bs. Just think about them rationally. I say this as if it's simple. But, think about what are you going to physically do if this doesn't work out? Because I think that does help ground you a tiny bit. If you do decide to do this, having talks with him about time management and what's going to go on equally can ground you. Because once you put things in a more physical, real sense, it can help you just be a little bit more calmer, because right now everything's just sort of like, I want to try sleeping with other women. What does that mean for you? What does it mean? Right now you have no idea. So yeah, once you sort out the communication thing, is he going to do therapy? If he doesn't, I don't predict good things if he doesn't want to go to therapy and he doesn't want to communicate. And I think that you might need to think about that plan B a little bit more if that's the case. If he does, you need to think about time management. How is this going to physically work? What is his ideal non-monogamous situation? And how does that mix with you having a child who needs to be the primary focus and the most important thing in both of your lives, which I think that your child is, but I'm just sort of reiterating that. And then again, I think it's worth explore these with a therapist, because I think that right now exploring them just on your own might get a little bit difficult with feelings. But I think, what about his previous experiences didn't satisfy him? What different things is he looking for now? I think that would just be interesting to know, because that as well, I think, will fit into, if he hasn't thought about his ideal situation, then it'll kind of spur on what that ideal situation is. Is he going for more one-night stands, or is he looking for more of a relationship? Does he know? But working that through with a therapist is really, really helpful. And last but not least, think about yourself. Not least at all. What do you want out of this? What are the benefits? And so sorry about the siren noise. Even if you don't have any desire to pursue another romantic relationship, what is the benefit that you get out of the situation? Because there might be a benefit. Even if you're not that interested in dating other people, there might still be benefits, and it's worth thinking about that. And then, yeah, last but not least as well, don't think that there's something wrong with you if you do try this and you get all sorts of huge scary feels. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're not ready. It doesn't mean, you're not this weird emotional gladiator that articles make you think that you have to be in order to do polyamory. People get scared. Another thing to add about that is that even if you're quote unquote seasoned, sometimes when you're having a bad time or things are really, really stressful, you can still kind of have a big anxiety reaction because everything else is kind of putting pressure on you. All life's major stressors, like moving, having a new kid. I mean, you already know what having one kid is like. So imagine, you're in that situation. Sometimes you'll be in a good situation, and so that news would be okay. Sometimes not so great. The news will be different. So don't think that there's anything wrong with you if you're afraid or if you feel fear. It's very, very normal to have these fears. And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. You can't do it. Yeah, so that's basically my advice, and I really, really hope it helps. And best of luck.
thank you for listening to episode 14 of the Non-Monogamy Help podcast. First thing I'm going to do is, if you don't already know, if you become a patron of the podcast, then and you donate $5 or more, it's dollars for some reason, and it doesn't let you do other currencies, but if you put in your information, it somehow all works out in a way that I'm not aware of. If you donate $5 or more a month, then I read your name at the end of the podcast. So I'm going to do that for the $5 patrons now. Thank you so much to Laura Boylan, Chris Alry Jones, Lena Frenzy, and James Wartell. Those are the current $5 patrons. At the time of recording, if you have donated $5 or more since before this was recorded, then you will be in the next podcast. Exciting. So yes, if you would like to support the podcast and the columns, please become a patron. You can go to patreon.com/Lola Phoenix. And yeah, even $1 a month is super awesome, and you get all of the columns in the podcasts a few days early before everyone else does. And there's other fiction bits that I write that you also get. So yeah, please send your letters, if you have any of them, to nonmonogamyhelp@gmail.com, and they'll be in the podcast or the column anonymously. And of course, if you want to read the columns, you can go to medium.com/ you can go to nonmonogamyhelp.com, and it will send you to the Medium column. So I don't have to talk about hyphens all the time, which is exciting. You can get the newsletter at tinyletter.com/nonmonogamyhelp, and that will send you the columns and the podcast 2 days before they go live. And you can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/nonmonogamyhelp. Right, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in a week after next. Yes.
You've been listening to Non-Monogamy Help. Our podcast music has been provided by Chris Albury Jones at albury-jones.com, and the art was made by Dom Jung at domduong.com. Thank you for listening.